Today is part 2 of the Mint Collective show. We are going to cover a couple of the panels that we got to see and a few juicy nuggets that we took away from it. Stick around. Hello to all my sports card collectors, investors, all of my collectibles friends. Back again for another video. If you are looking for sports card news, hobby type info, we're talking about cards pretty much 5, 6, 7 days a week. Hit that subscribe button. Please give me a like. Notification bell if you'd like, and then also connect with me on IG at SportsCardDad, and I'm also on the Twitter machine, the SportsCardDad. All right, guys, so yesterday's video really touched on the exhibit space, overall feel of the show, hanging out with other content creators, meeting new businesses, all of that sort of thing. Today, I'm going to talk about 2 panels that I was able to attend. I will also say, too, it looks like they are posting the full panels, or at least I've seen 1 or 2 of them pop up on the YouTube channel Collectible TV. So if you're looking for that full picture, I'm not sure if the ones I'm talking about are up there yet, but I'm sure they will be at some point. So that can be obviously the reference point to go back and check out later. The first panel that I'm going to talk about, basically the title was The Future of Data in the Hobby, or the Importance of Data in the Hobby. It was run by the Card Ladder folks, Christina, Chris, Josh, and Josh Luber. This was the closeout panel to end the show, and there were some really interesting parts. Josh Luber had some things. He had said some things that I had not necessarily heard before, and so I want to touch on that, share that with you all. And there was also a Q&A session that was on the back end of this that was very, very interesting. So let's talk about that now. So one particular quote that he said is that eBay is not the mousetrap for buying sports cards long term. In other words, they're not going to be everything, in his opinion, to buying sports cards. And I think that that's a fairly obvious take, just being that there's so much competition now. But again, you have so many market forces at work here. And before eBay's recent announcements, I would really have agreed with him. I think that really the game-changing piece that eBay is doing is adding the vault and just making it easier to buy and sell with some of the instant sales. They want to compete with essentially all of these startup companies that have come in, including Fractional. They've added in Fractional as part of their goal, part of their plan that they are working up. So eBay is not going down without a fight. I don't think that they're necessarily going to be the catch-all for buying sports cards. I do think that there will be various options. I ran into Tim from ComC while we were at that show. Great guy. And I think ComC is going to be viable and always will be. So, but eBay not going down. They've got the thing with eBay that they've got to figure out is, obviously shill bidding has always kind of been an issue. The non-paying buyer thing on eBay is a big problem. I know that they get a non-paying buyer strike or whatever after 4 days, but then they just open up another account and do it all over again. And part of the big issue there is that a lot of the data tools, we're talking about data in the panel, whether we're talking about Card Ladder or Market Movers or, Card Hedge, any of these other data tools, the main piece of data that they're gathering from the main site is eBay. Yes, they're taken from MySlabs and they're taken from PWCC and some of these other places, but eBay is the majority of that data. So for people that are trying to set comps on a particular card, whether it's by people using eBay sold listings or looking at the data tool to try to figure out, what's what, that makes this tough. So with eBay being just the big space, they're really the most data points come from eBay. So it's very, very important for that data to be as accurate as possible. And it's very difficult. It's a big challenge for all of those data tools. I think that as the data tools grow, mature, and all these companies get better and better, that it will get easier and easier to identify these bad sales. But it's going to take time. It's not a perfect system. And, a lot of it's being done manually right now, and so that's tricky. So we'll see how that goes. But I just thought that was an interesting take from Josh, just that, eBay might not be the end all be all for buying sports cards moving forward, but eBay definitely has something to say about that. They're certainly trying to be the end all be all. They are number one, and they are working towards maintaining that and keeping it. Some people were curious about how many bids came through for that new Zero Cool product, the VFriends product. Josh said there was 22,641 total bidders that came through for that product, and that's how they reached that $2,100 or so box price for that initial release. The next release is going to be Jackass, the Jackass movie that had come out. I'm not sure if it was whatever the last couple of years, but anyway, they are doing their next product is going to be based around that. So I thought that was kind of interesting. And the one thing that he did say too is you can't have the same expectations for one product coming to the next product because there are fans for VFriends and Gary V. There are a totally different set of fans for the Jackass stuff. And then for future, releases, there will be a different set for them. So there's probably gonna be different price points, different checklist and everything else. He did also say the goal is to have blind Dutch auctions for tops, not an immediate release, not an immediate thing that they would be doing, but eventually they do want to do that. They want to figure out too, on the high end stuff, it's easier. He said, expect to see a print run for everything that has a blind Dutch auction attached to it. And then also the goal is to have an immediate checklist upon release. So you've got a full checklist and you have exact the amount, the print run, how many boxes are going to be sold. That's awesome. I like that. Now, the question kind of came about of what about lower end, mid end stuff? And he said it could possibly be doable for 10,000 boxes, let's say, to do a blind Dutch auction, but no guarantees there. And he said that they need more data points. They'll probably try it out at some point, see what the response is like, and then kind of go from there. A lot of this is going to be trial and error and trying to work out the best way of doing things. But so it was interesting because he did say it's not impossible for that to happen. They just have to see how it plays out. Josh Luber also said his wish is to also see data aggregated from hobby shops as well as breakers, which of course presents a big challenge to the data tools, the current data tools, the way that they are. And maybe this is something separate from, the card ladders and the market movers of the world. But he would like to see sales data coming from hobby shops. And I just don't know how there would have to be some sort of agreement. I would think some sort of an alliance between hobby shops that are within I don't know. I'm throwing things out there, kind of a Fanatics association that's tracking this sort of thing. He did say Fanatics has an interest and wants to be involved in data collection. They want to be in this space, which another kind of interesting little tidbit there. Obviously, Fanatics does all that on the sports memorabilia side, selling jerseys. They're gathering customer information. They're tracking all the sales, everything else. They are very interested in also playing in that data space. So we'll see what that means exactly. If they're going to do their own thing, what they're going to do. But getting individual sales from hobby shops and breakers, we always talk about it's so difficult when you're looking at a data tool. It's not tracking, show sales, which is a ton of sales now. Shows nowadays are packed. When we were in the pandemic, nobody was going to shows. So, eBay and all that stuff, great. That's great information. That's pretty much summing up the market. Now, you just don't know. There's so many private sales or so many person-to-person sales that, getting that information from a hobby shop, and we're talking about wax sales, we're talking about singles, so my takeaway from that is we are in the infancy of data collection, the whole data side of it. What we have now with the data tools is great, and it's a great start, but so much work ahead, so much more work to be done in that space, and maybe open for a variety of different companies to be involved in that data collection, data sharing. And my opinion is that that's great for the end consumer. The more data that we've got as far as print runs, as far as the checklist, the immediate checklist, I don't have to worry about is this rare? Is it not rare? Is it short printed? It's not numbered. How do I know if it's actually a short print? Getting some sort of an idea of that up front is going to be great. So I think in the years ahead, this is not something that's going to happen tomorrow, but it's going to be great to see kind of where are we in 5 years as far as all this goes. When you go to buy your basketball product, your football product, what does that look like for you? I think it's going to look a lot different. There's going to be a lot more information in the hands of a collector / investor / hybrid than there ever has been before in the hobby. Okay, so the Q&A section, very interesting. First question that I heard was coming about data standardization, and this kind of plays back again to the checklist. In collectibles, and whether we're talking about, well, especially on the high end, frankly, you're always looking for provenance. What's the backstory of this thing? Artwork. Where did this artwork come from? Someone's buying this, $1 million painting. What's the story behind it? And typically you need to have a nice storyline to go with it to make, that's part of knowing if it's fake or not fake. Okay, this person owned it at this time, that person owned it at that time, and that's part of the story of that particular collectible, that particular item, which also makes it collectible because it's got a really cool story behind it. And so the same thing is what Josh Luber is talking about he would like to see for cards. Who owned this Michael Jordan PMG at this point? How is it acquired? How is it made? How is it manufactured? How it changed hands? all this stuff, the stories behind the actual items is something that is another piece of data that he would like to see built out. And I think it's the hobby, I think, would like that too. Again, more information, the better, I think, with a lot of this stuff. Now, coming up with that information, who's going to do this? Who is going to, put these stories out there? Because, frankly, there's just so much work to be done, even just in tracking sales prices, let alone, the stories behind individual cards. But I like the question. A lot of it had to do with checklists and also standardizing it, really having it down pat to where we know what's what in a product. Ivan from GPS stood up and had a question, and what was one that was really not even on my radar. Also, interesting piece where you've got GPS, a huge distributor, talking to Fanatics face to face, because we've speculated here. What is the future for distributors in the hobby? Of course, I think there will be a future, but Michael Rubin talking about, look, our deal is direct to consumer. That's how we've had success at Fanatics. He got into the sports card business, sports memorabilia business, because he saw that there was 9 middlemen, between transactions to get to that end collector. And Fanatics is interested in all that in betweenness, if you will. So curious to see their role moving forward as everything kind of shifts over. His question was interesting. It was about entertainment cards versus non-sports cards. He had an issue. He would rather it be called entertainment cards. Can we get away from non-sports cards being kind of a title for everything that's not sports cards? Luber kind of came back with, likes entertainment cards, but what do you do for politicians, and then joked about, well, politicians kind of are entertainment. Actually, he's not wrong there. But that's why they've kind of stuck with that culture term when they're talking about culture cards. It's a kind of catch-all for, important people in society, in culture, and that's what they're trying to capture. So they don't want to just, limit it. And I think that's why they're using culture. But it was an interesting kind of back and forth, entertainment versus non-sports, culture. And lastly, there was a question, a little bit of awkwardness in the room, frankly, and it was a hobby shop owner that stood up and he didn't beat around the bush. He said, hey, my lease is coming due, and with all the direct to consumer talk, kind of the unknowns around what it's going to mean for allocations to hobby shops and all that stuff, should I renew my lease? Is what he asked Josh Luber, and a guy behind me yelled out, great question. And it was like, what's Josh supposed to say, except for what he did say was kind of the right thing to say is, I can't consult you on your own business. And of course, every hobby shop's got their own, balance sheet and their own way of doing business. So obviously he can't say renew that lease or let the lease go. But it was just one of those kind of moments where it's like the hobby shop owner right in front of of Fanatics, Josh Luber. And Josh did kind of the best he could to answer the question. But, there's not really a lot that he can say or do right now. We're still kind of working through that process. Fanatics is still figuring it all out themselves, and how they're going to operate everything. But that was it was an interesting moment. I wouldn't call it a tense moment, but it was a moment where everybody was kind of zeroed in on, this is happening. All right, the second panel, the content creator panel. Also, this was good. And I think it got a little bit of notoriety, or, people paid attention to it because the title of this panel was around authentic content. So anyone that makes content in this space is like, oh, okay, what are they going to say? And who are the panelists? Oh, are they authentic? Are they more authentic than me or him or who or she or whatever? And it was just kind of funny. I saw kind of the reactions to those, the titles of all the different panels. And look, they're trying to be somewhat buzzy with these titles. They're trying to gain interest in the same way that we put up titles for YouTube videos, etc. And so I think this got people's attention. This panel had Jeremy Lee from Sportscards Live, Peter Pacman and the RPS team, and also Mike Gio and Jesse from Sports Card Nonsense. Ezra of Collectible did a really good job moderating this. I saw this kind of going a few different ways. I mean, they talked about some of the kind of the usual stuff of just responsibilities by content creators, how that's evolved over time. But I would say the main thrust of this particular panel, in my opinion, was more about hobby growth and what can we do to include, inclusion around that? What can we do to get more minority groups groups, females involved in the hobby, and various ideas of how to accomplish this. Questions to the content creators were, what are you doing in the space to kind of grow it? Of course, there's a lot of talk about getting young people, getting kids, getting teenagers involved in it for the collecting piece, but then also teaching them the business aspect of the hobby. And look, when I was a kid, I was 8, 9, 10 years old when I started collecting cards. This was the first time I had a Beckett price guide in front of me. I had cards and I was looking to figure out, oh, this is a 10 cents card. This is 50 cents. This is $1. Oh, and look, it's gone up. It's now $1.50 instead of $1. Very different price points back then too, guys, when we were talking about cards in the Beckett magazine, obviously. But it was the first time in my life that I was using my personal finance. I was looking at my own my allowance and trying to figure out which singles I would try to buy at the card shop, which packs I want to buy to try to pull certain cards. But that's all commerce. That's all learning about economics, learning about business. And I was young. I was really young. And there's all sorts of conversation about, there needs to be more financial schooling in actual school. And I couldn't agree more with that. There's a lot of different subjects in school where you're kind of like, yeah, this is important, but financial literacy being a big one. And that's why, this channel is part of that. We try to attempt, to be some sort of a help in that regard. But it's also, look, there's a lot of that stuff out now. And for young people, they've got to get a grasp on it early on, fend off from some of the usual mistakes that we've all made financially, so I think that this was an important conversation. I wouldn't say there was anything super controversial or new, anything brand new, but it was great to meet those guys, face to face again, hear what they had to say. Peter Pacman and his team, I had never met Peter before. They're doing hobby music, so definitely check them out. They are on Instagram. I like the conversation, and then also seeing how this conversation evolves more. Obviously, as a content creator, I have interest in this particular subject, but there's so many different topics within this, group. And so with the panels that they had, they did a good job putting together different interesting subjects, but there's so much to build on. There's so much nuance out there that can be in future shows as this thing grows out. But for the first show, really good how they put this on, and it was all, went off seamlessly without a hitch. Overall takeaways with this show, I think, is this was a great starting point. It was a professional show. It was well done, but you could just see there's so much opportunity, especially, as the hobby does grow. If the hobby is successful in growing, I should say. I know there's a lot of folks that say like, hey, look, this was a pandemic thing and it all goes back to the way that it was, or it's never going to be a 2x, 3x, 10x or whatever what it was. You could be very right. But this show, I think it provides some excitement of like, there are a lot of efforts going on to grow out the hobby, and that is exciting. So it's hard to not kind of take that into account. But I'm also a realist as well, to where, look, a lot of these companies won't make it, just like in the world. That's how it works. It's small business. A lot of this stuff is small business, but awesome to really see them, seeing people taking a shot at a hobby that they love, working within the hobby that they love. And so I really appreciated that. And I hope that continues on. I want to see that incubation of new companies, because a few of these new companies, these small companies, will be big companies one day. And it'll be cool to kind of be on the front end of that and have met those people behind those companies when they were first starting out. So guys, thank you very much for joining me here today. Let me know your thoughts in the comments. Anything, if you were at the show, but also if you're seeing some of these replays. Have an amazing day ahead. Stay healthy, stay awesome. I will talk to you again later.